Hello, I wanted to make a video today talking about magic. And then for those who stick around to the end, I will do a little story time kind of about my own life experience with magic. But first, we're going to talk about these guys here, specifically the starter commander decks. So this is a set of 5 decks that you can buy all together as a single package. And I've been seeing some videos online on YouTube kind of talking about whether or not these are worth it, and I've certainly also read reviews about how good these decks are. And I wanted to give my own sort of take here, because I find that a lot of those reviews that I've been seeing tend to kind of approach this topic from the perspective of how competitive these decks are, and value for money and stuff like that. And so I want to approach it more from the perspective of like a beginner Magic player, because that's what I am. I'm very, very new to Magic. So yeah, chances are if you are watching this video, you are not a very experienced Magic player who is looking to get into the competitive scene. You probably aren't looking at these decks anyway. So I want to talk about this product for, based on its target audience. So I decided to go for these starter commander decks because this is a product that the company that knows their cards the best have made for beginners. They're starter decks, right? And the reason why I think getting all 5 of these is a good starting point is because most people who are coming into Magic probably don't have a ton of experience with trading card games or TCGs, right? The truth is, I think most people coming into this are familiar with other styles of board games, but not TCGs. And when you think about that, most board games, you buy the board game, and all the pieces that you need to play that board game is within that box, right? Within that product that you buy. And as an example, you buy a chessboard, right? You have all the pieces that you need to start playing chess, right? If you buy Monopoly, all of the pieces that you need, the paper money, the hotels, the little little figurines, all that stuff is included in the box, right? And you can start playing with it right away. But more importantly, you can start playing with other people right away using all the contents from that one box, right? And so if you were to go out and just buy like a single Precon deck, a more premium pre-constructed deck, well, you don't have all the pieces to play, right? Sure, the pre-constructed deck has the cards that you need to play, but if chances are if you're a beginner, you're going to be playing other beginners. Well, that other person doesn't have a deck to play with, right? And so you can't actually play. You have to go out and look for people to play, and so that kind of goes against the point, I think, of Precon decks. The point of Precon decks, I think, is so that you can get right in and start playing. You open up, shuffle, start playing. But if you only buy one, well, your other beginner friends, maybe your spouse, they won't have the pieces to play, right? And so then what do you do? Well, you can go buy 2 decks, I suppose, right? And that's fine. So the one deck for your partner, one deck for you. You can start playing at home. The problem with that, of course, is that how do you choose what deck to buy, right? As somebody who's very new to Magic, I look at all these pre-constructed decks. I don't know what Wilds of Eldraine means. I don't know what Murders at Karlov Manor means. You know, I don't know what the differences are between all these different decks, right? How do you choose? It becomes overwhelming, and I don't know. I think going around buying individual decks kind of not the greatest introduction to the game. What's more, of course, if you just buy one deck and then your partner buys one deck, well, after a few goes at it, it starts to feel pretty samey, right? And what happens if you don't like your deck, right? Do you go and buy another deck? So it requires a lot of investment then, which is not beginner friendly. So if you buy a set of 5 starter commander decks like this, well, you get to take your time and kind of discover, you know, which deck, which color, which flavor works for you, right? That's the other thing, right? Like, aside from just the themes of the deck that you don't understand, you don't know the differences between a black deck, a red deck, a white deck, so on and so forth, right? But having a set of 5 commander decks with all the different colors, you can explore the sort of the identities of each of the different colors. So yeah, you know, you might play with this one day, play with this another day, and your partner also can choose to play with this deck or this deck, so on, right? So I think that's great, having 5 decks that allows you to, you know, come home and just start playing with, you know, your partner, or, you know, maybe you have a friend who, you know, is interested in Magic but hasn't gotten into it and hasn't or doesn't feel compelled to sort of make an investment in the deck yet. Well, you just hand them a deck and say, here, why don't you play with this one, and I'll play with this one, and then, you know, you have the pieces to play a game right then and there, right? Okay, so another thing I wanted to talk about is the more TCG aspect, the trading card game aspect of Magic, right? So let's say you start playing and you feel like you're going to keep going with it. By the way, that's not a given. As you know, I haven't played that much Magic since getting these cards, but I can tell you, definitely I can see that there are people who would probably buy Magic cards, play a little while, and then not really get into it, you know, because there are problems with this game, and I don't think it's a given that anybody who buys a deck is going to continue playing. And so, but anyway, say you do buy, you know, a deck and you want to start to dabble in, you know, constructing your deck, upgrading your deck. Well, it's nice having all of these decks on hand, because you can start customizing your deck as you go. For example, I am currently trying to main this deck. This is going to be my main deck, the Grave Danger deck with Gisa and Geralf as a commander. It's a blue-black deck. You know, I've already played a few games with this. You know, it's fine, but I see some sort of deficiencies. I notice that there's some cards that I never really want to play. And so I can actually start looking at the other decks for ways to upgrade, right? So for example, where is it? Chaos Incarnate. Oh, no, Chaos Incarnate is, oh, it's right here, right? This is a red-black deck. So this is going to be a source of black cards I can use to, you know, customize this one. And similarly, this First Flight deck is a blue-white deck. So this is going to be a source of blue cards that I can use to customize my Grave Danger deck, right? And it doesn't require me to go out and buy booster packs, right? So I think that's kind of great. So not only do you have the elements to start playing a game amongst beginners, right? Like how a board game should be. You also have the ingredients to do a little bit of customization without spending a lot of money, you know, investing in the game that you're not even sure if you're going to be playing for very much, very long time, right? Sure. Once you've done what you can with all the cards that you have on hand, if you want to go get booster packs, go ahead, right? Go ahead. But it's important to remember that trading card games are very different from board games in the sense that trading card games are pay to win. Board games, you look at a game like chess, which has been around for hundreds of years, right? There's very little of there is no pay to win. There's actually almost no randomization in that game. You know all the rules, all the pieces and how they move are all set. Two people sit down at a board and start playing, and that's it. Whereas with trading card games, well, you don't know what cards the other person across from you is holding. He might have spent a fortune on his cards and then just steamroll you every single game, right? So yeah, trading card games are the original pay-to-win type of game. For people who aren't familiar, pay-to-win is a reviled concept within the video game industry. I would say nobody likes pay-to-win, right? But it's somehow accepted among trading card games. But the thing is, to remember, is that it's not something that's going to be loved by everybody, and myself included. I despise the pay-to-win aspect of Magic, and so having a standardized set of cards that I can use to play a fair-ish game. My hope is that Wizards of the Coast somehow balance these 5 decks, right, to not be too overpowering amongst these 5 decks. Means that I can play a fair game almost like chess, right, instead of a game where if I'm playing somebody who has spent a fortune on their deck, they're just going to steamroll me. But because my guess is these are relatively balanced by Wizards of the Coast, it becomes more of a chess match, and I prefer that, right? And then, even if you want to start playing with customization, well, it's not like any of these decks contain extremely valuable, extremely overpowered cards, right? And I can customize my deck using using these guys. My spouse who's playing this Token Triumph deck, she can also customize this using the green cards from this Draconic Destruction, as well as the white cards from the First Flight deck, right? So it's the same pool of cards, even if you want to start playing around with customization. So anyway, for that reason, I think this is a good way to get into it. Now, let's talk about value quickly, because I think you could. I think when these first released, it was pretty expensive. It was like $180 maybe. So I don't think it's worth that kind of money. Like no board game out there is worth that kind of money, right? But I got this on a very steep discount. I think it was only about 60 some bucks for all 5 decks. I think that's very worth it. So if you can find this set for that kind of price, I think it's a great entry point to get into the game of Magic. So that's it. Now I'll go on to the more story time aspect of this video. So I just want to talk a little bit about my history with Magic. So even though I'm a very new player to Magic, I've literally played maybe 5 games so far. I've actually known about Magic as a game since high school. And I remember being young and I would sit and watch my friends play. I myself never played. I didn't have money, and so I didn't really have the ability to just go and buy playing cards. But moreover, I didn't even know where you could buy these back in the day. Honestly, I'm like thinking back, to my high school days. How would I even have bought these? I didn't even know where they sell them. But yeah, I was very intrigued by it, and I would sit there and I would watch people play. And I will say, back then, even as a non-player, it was easy to sit and watch a game being played because the cards were much simpler back then, you know? I think nowadays, and this is one of the reasons why I think it's not a given that everybody's going to like Magic, I find that these days the mechanics are way too complicated. Like every single card in every one of these decks has just like a wall of text saying what that card does. Every card has special abilities. It starts to get confusing very quickly. So I don't love that. And these are starter decks, right? My hope actually was when I went into the starter, when I bought these starter decks, was that they would be more akin to the the olden days when you had more basic cards. But anyway, so yeah, I would watch my friends play. I was very intrigued, and I even I would even like draw my own cards at home. On paper, I would cut them out, and I almost pretend like I had my own Magic cards. Not that I ever played with them, right? Obviously, I like bring some like hand-drawn cards to school to play with. But it kind of, I kind of enjoy the process of like designing cards when I was a kid. But and that was just at the sort of beginning part of high school. Towards the end, I kind of lost interest in Magic. I don't even know if my friends were still playing Magic at that point. And then, fast forward quite a bit. Like I hadn't thought about Magic in a long time. But then in med school, one of my very good friends from med school, he was an avid Magic player. I knew that he played Magic, and in fact, he had his own YouTube channel that he used to talk about Magic. But despite having a very close friend that was into Magic, I still never got into Magic. At that point, I guess I had just other things to focus on. Like or I shouldn't say focus on, but I had other things that I was interested in, namely video games, right? So yeah, I didn't get into Magic, and to be honest, at that time I still didn't have money, and so I wasn't going to go out and buy a bunch of Magic cards. And it's important to remember, even during my medical school years, which would have been almost 20 years ago, 17 years ago, back then, like I still wouldn't have known where to buy these cards. Remember, online shopping wasn't that big a thing back then. It probably existed, but I didn't have any familiarity with it, and so so I still just didn't get into it. So then, it was residency and fellowship, and I had all other things I was into back then, and then the thing that got me back into Magic, most recently was over the holidays. We were visiting family, and it so happened that my wife's stepbrother revealed to us that he just got into Magic, especially this Commander sort of format. And he talked about how it was beginner friendly, it was casual, and it's multiplayer, right? So it's not just one-on-one, which was what I was used to seeing back in the day, one-on-one games. So it kind of felt more like a board game, like for a whole family. If you can play 4 players, right? So that kind of got me interested in it again. And of course, this past holidays, I'm in a stage of my life where I was making money, and so I felt like I could afford to buy these cards. And then, moreover, online shopping is a big thing now. Like we buy a lot of things online, and so it was no problem just going onto Amazon and buying this, right? So a lot of things lined up, and ultimately we chose to take the plunge. And so far, I am enjoying it. And as I was expecting, I don't think my wife is quite as into it as I am. I don't think she grew up with Magic, though I will say she did grow up with Pokemon, which is another trading card game. She actually has more experience with trading card games than I do, because I think she actually played Pokemon. Even though I knew about Magic back in the day, I never actually played Magic. But the thing is, it's a different theme type of, it's much more fantasy rather than Pokemon, which has got cute animals in it. And then the mechanics are so complicated. I could see that it was very much confusing to an absolute beginner. So that's why I said earlier, I don't think it's a given that people who pick up these for the first time are going to stick with it. So anyway, that's about all I wanted to say about Magic so far. I will probably make a separate video, if I ever get to it, of my customization for this blue-black deck. Yeah, I'll see you in the next one.